Over 170 years ago, Henry David Thoreau observed, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." Is this you? Do you feel trapped in the rat race we call life? Are you truly the person you desire to be? Are you unhappy with where you find yourself physically, mentally, or spiritually? Let's make the life changes necessary to empower you with happiness and contentment, belief and confidence in yourself. Join the discussion with countless other people who want nothing more than to be the best version of themselves that they can be. Welcome to Better with Jimmy Blackman.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to Better. I'm your host, Jimmy Blackman, and today I got an old buddy on, Scott Harrington. He's out in California, Monterey area, living the dream, of course. And we're going to talk a bit today about Scott's journey, professional journey from West Point through the military, then over into business and what he's doing now. But also we're going to get to hit on a crucible event that happened in his life, a bike crash that was significant. And we'll pry into kind of the mental side of what that meant and the thoughts that went through his mind when his life was at stake, pretty much, with this significance of this crash. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm really excited to be on today.
Good. Well, why don't we just start there with you growing up and going off to West Point? How did kind of that come to be, and then a little bit into the military?
Yeah, absolutely, Jimmy. So I grew up in the Northeast, kind of near the Boston area. Oldest of five kids. So kind of lots happening in my younger years. I was always a athletically inclined person. So just think lots of activities between martial arts, gymnastics, soccer, running in later years, all those things happening. And for me, in terms of, why West Point, I had a desire to serve and a desire to understand leadership better. What does it take to move large bodies of people to achieve outstanding things? I remember a particular trigger for me was reading the story of MacArthur when I was young, and that led me on a quest to just try and understand that better. And West Point seemed like a natural place to do that.
So you're in Boston, University Haven there. And academia, yeah, and you go up the Hudson.
That's right.
So you get up to West Point, and I want to talk about kind of the cycling team there. Ultimately, you're the captain of the cycling team, and you wind up, of course, running brought us together. You get into running, and I was the captain of the Fort Campbell 10-miler team, and Scott is an Apache helicopter pilot, and so he came in and was a great runner and wound up being on the team. And so we spent a lot of time telling lies, sweating, running across Fort Campbell. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So while West Point, I was on both track team for most of the time, and then cycling team in later years. Wasn't the captain there. I've been captain of a number of teams in my high school years. Across different track and cross country venues, but did cycle. We went to national championships, with that team there. Post West Point, I carried that on, where I always kept a little bit of both activities in my life. So some running, focused on your 10Ks and marathons and things like that. And then cycling, particularly around the spring and summer season, kind of remained a big part for me. My first duty station was down in Texas. It turns out that, trying to get in 10-mile runs in the afternoon in Texas can be, not the most fun, possibly brain damaging activity as you're out there running at 110 or something. And so, as we kind of intercepted each other when we were living there in Tennessee, I was inspired to try the Army 10-miler. You were captaining that team at the time. And just to put ourselves back in time, this was a day where you didn't wake yourself up with your phone in the morning. Kind of the natural thing was you just roll out of bed, put on your shoes, and I'm going running with Jimmy. And that was such just a wonderful period of life to have that camaraderie of a team around you again, and a real focus in what we were trying to do. And you brought so much energy to that as an endeavor. And for folks that haven't been around you, they might just not understand what that looks like in terms of, this wasn't just a pack of guys and girls going out to run in the morning. This is a pack of guys and girls going out to win, in October when that race is.
We did win. We won
which we
the
did.
next category. Yeah.
Which we ultimately did. Which was probably the only saving grace for me, because I think that was probably the first year of marriage for me. And so my wife was trying to understand, what is this and who is Jimmy and why are you rolling out of the door at 5 a.m?
I have a relationship with this guy too.
Exactly.
So you tell us about that. You didn't marry the local Clarksvillian girl.
No, not at all. And so, as you mentioned, I was an aviator. I was at a point where I had completed my early platoon leader assignments, and this was just immediately post 9/11, and I was honestly like itching to get into the fight, as I think any one of us would be and was at that point in time. I was in a heavy division, and for listeners that aren't familiar with the military, it just means that was not a unit that was likely to go to Afghanistan, which is a mountainous area. Just tanks don't do well there. And so I stuck up my paw with a friend of mine and had said, if you get any orders for anywhere, put me on them. I want to go. And sure enough, he called down just a few days later, and I picked up the phone and I said, great, this is it. And the question he came out of his mouth wasn't what I was expecting. And he said, do you know where Eritrea is? And I said, what? And from there, I found myself on a flight shortly afterwards to join a United Nations mission in Eritrea and Ethiopia, which was actually the United Nations' most diverse mission at the time, 42 contributing countries, demarcating the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and ultimately led to the fact that I met my wife, who was there flying for the United Nations and working with them at the time.
And she was from?
South Africa.
South Africa, yeah, and she's an airline pilot now.
That's right. Yeah. So she's out there still flying, every week.
Yeah, awesome. So you just say that, and to the average person, they probably can't imagine the opportunity to, hey, you want to go do this UN mission? Whatever, we need some folks to do this, and you just up and off to some third world country. I think we take for granted sometimes the diverse experiences and opportunities that the military presented us.
I would say I do not take it for granted, Jimmy. Certainly, in reflection, when you see the relative difference between those sets of experiences and the ease of just flowing into that, where granted, I happen to stick up my hand, and other folks will, hey, I've got a young family or something. I didn't at the time, so it's perfect for me. But boom, there I was. And you're absolutely right. I grew up kind of as a person really geeked out on what's happening around the world and how, what's happening, what's the circumstance in this country or that country, and what's the, set of relations between these nations. So to be in the most diverse mission that the United Nations had was, it was literally like going to Epcot. And so, I fly in, and you're in these team sites where there's 8 of us across, I think it was roughly 20 team sites along the border, and each of the 8 represented a different country. So just in the team site that I was in, off the top of my head, we had one Nepalese officer, Romanian, Ukrainian, Russian, maybe Bangladeshi, and myself. So I'm probably leaving out one of our comrades there. And that was every team site, right? So you're all configured in that way. So you go out on patrol and you meet up with, the other 18 guys. You got 16 people from 16 different nations that are all trying to make something happen, using English as a common language, but not without the doctrinal backing that we would know in the Army. And you probably coach people on in leadership in the sense of having standard ways by which you do things. And what was so amazing for that was to be a young person and trusted to be out there in a moderate risk environment, but largely to just figure it out. And your job in terms of figuring it out was to make sure these two warring sides didn't go back to war. So pretty significant circumstances. And to your point, that is not the experience of the average 25-year-old that comes out of school and is, a couple of years into a marketing role inside of an organization or something. So I feel tremendously fortunate for that set of formative experiences that the Army provided.
Yeah. So, like you said, you're 25, 26 years old. You're representing the United States. You're in a UN environment like that where it really matters. And it's kind of go figure it out. And just thrust into something with that type of responsibility so young, it builds tremendous skills. And I think a lot of our folks, I get a lot of phone calls from folks either retiring or young folks departing the Army that work for me, as lieutenants or captains, and now they're getting out, and they don't really understand the applicability of the skill set. In many cases, they don't even recognize it as a skill because it's just the way they operate. It's the way they think, the way they do things. And they're really valuable when you can translate that to, they may not understand it, but they're like, here, I'll give it a try. And they just get everybody in the room and start asking questions. As a consultant, that's the way you figure things out. I mean, a client's calling you because they got a problem they can't solve, don't have the resources or capability. And a lot of times it's nothing more than get everybody in the room together and start talking, start asking questions, and then come up with a plan. It's a unique skill set that I really am grateful I was able to get through a career in the military.
100%. And on those missions in particular, it was an example of also being supported by a training system that was just so amazing and prepared you for that type of organic problem solving. So the American contingent tended to be significantly younger than the other contributing nations. So the UN standard was something that looked more like, folks that probably had somewhere 10 to 15 years of service. And myself and a few of the other American officers were more at a period of probably 6 or 7 years of service at that point in time. And so you do bear the weight of feeling of, I haven't yet experienced as much of the world as these folks have, but I'm going to show up in my best way each and every day. And I'm going to use all of those largely soft skills to work through those problems together and take advantage of some of what the others are bringing to the team.
Absolutely. So we've said some great things about the Army institution and the skill set you leave with naturally, because really the design of responsibility, authority, and accountability, but it doesn't come without its warts either. There are challenges to the Army culture and the system, and ultimately the politics drove me nuts as I got very senior in it. But talk about your journey. You came here to Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne Division. Yep. You were a company commander, leading at your first, larger organization of Apaches, and then you decide to transition. Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So company command, for those that are not familiar with what that implies, is something different and larger than just traditional managerial responsibilities. It's the first instance of kind of having full legal responsibility for the soldiers under your command, and an implied responsibility to care for and make circumstances the best for those families associated as well, which you've had at multiple levels yourself. And it's a really significant leadership responsibility relative to age and experience. And it is, I can't imagine a better and more formative leadership foundry than what that is, especially in our military, not just the Army, similar commands levels. I had the great fortune to have command first of an attack helicopter company, and then later a maintenance company at Fort Campbell under what I would say is the best commander I can imagine working for, which was Colonel at the time, Doug Gabram. And I was able to learn so many things from him in terms of how to think deeply about enabling everyone in the team to perform at their best. That has remained, I would like to say it was a part of how I led before, and it probably was to a degree, but his mentorship really enabled me to bring that up a level where you're thinking of, yes, the objectives we're trying to achieve, but how do I unlock the potential of everyone here aligned to their goals to help fulfill that? And with that command, the basic arc of that journey there was I took over for a unit that had just come back from what was a extended deployment for the first Iraq deployment. Everybody was pretty beat up, pretty tired, lots of folks coming in and out. And I had a real opportunity to rebuild that team. And it was a wonderful chance to do so, reset the team, go through an entire train up cycle, and then deploy to Iraq in 05 and 06 at the same time that you were there yourself. And our responsibilities in that period of time were support to the ground units that were, let's largely say, the battle space north and west of Baghdad. A lot of territory to be responsible for, and a very at the time a very thinning ground force. So just to put it in context for any listeners, is that means you're kind of constantly in a react and scramble mode. Some planned operations in there, but largely you're trying to provide air coverage and then react to events as they're happening. So you have to train for a lot of agility and empower each and every level of the organization to make decisions that are best for what they observe in the place that they are with what they have.
Very situational decision making that's moving rapidly
all the time. So in terms of what does that help one to develop in terms of leadership, and how's it applicable to maybe some folks in your audience, is this is a circumstance you can't be there all the time as the leader. The clock runs 24 hours. Mission sets are constantly taking off and landing. They're happening in diverse areas of the battle space. As I mentioned, sometimes planned, sometimes unplanned. You have to build systems that support each of those individual decision makers and their teams as best as able for what you don't know they'll encounter, but you can say, I'm going to prepare the team for this range of things. And then I'm going to develop within them the ability to react, even if it's outside of our planned range.
Absolutely. It's so applicable today. We're calling this the age of disruption, and the only constant is change. And it's not just change, it's a problem. It's the pace of change, the rate of change. And so leaders that are not empowered, don't have the authority, or are hesitant to use initiative and employ the authority that they have allegedly been given, are hamstrung. And it slows the organization down. Speed is key today. And in order to do that, like you said, you've got to build those teams. And it's a huge investment of time and energy more than anything else. It's a way of thinking. And a lot of leaders just never get there because risk becomes a challenge. And we'll talk about risk in a minute. Risk, I trust you, Scott. That sounds well, that briefs well. But when someone else is assuming risk for you, that feels different.
It feels very different. In the business context, you empower your sales leaders in that way all the time. They're going out and they're essentially signing the business up for obligations to deliver. And in some industries, that means some it's really simple. You just sold some units that were kind of rolling off a production line, and that's okay. You've contained that risk. It's a physical product and it's scoped in a certain way. In other industries, that is largely open-ended. If you sign, say, a major consulting agreement, there's so many variables that can go into what is there that the person you're entrusting to speak on behalf of the organization or a large-scale tech implementation would have a similar ability to, kind of could go sideways if people are making irresponsible decisions. So you're assigning trust in multiple ways. And to your point, as rate of change amplifies, and visibility of decisions is also generally broader today than it was in the past. Spending time really early to align on values, and helping to teach, coach, and mentor around values-based decision-making, and then consciously choosing to accept increasing but limited degrees of risk as you go is, I think, the only sustainable way to build your team and ultimately build the organization. And that can feel uncomfortable for both sides. Sometimes you find the leader doesn't want to relinquish control. Other times I've definitely found the individual you're trying to have take on more risk doesn't want to take it because they
Yep.
either had an experience in the past where they felt burned or something. So from a leader development perspective, I genuinely believe it's something you need to consciously attend to and plan for, and work on repetitively over time.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I often tell, those that we're coaching, leading in our workshops, or if you're not delegating authority, there's one or two problems. One, you won't let go. It's your problem. Or two, you don't have the right person in the right position and you don't trust to delegate to them. And so I always say train, trust, and empower. If you don't train them, you won't trust them. And if you don't trust them, you won't empower them. And then you mentioned the other one. The other side of that is you tell them they have the authority, you give them that authority, but they still ask permission because they're uncomfortable assuming the risk themselves. And so they keep coming back. But you really put that in a good context. I have a couple of clients that are banking and wealth management. And they're selling services in many cases, and every client has different needs and different desires. And so these are very complex services that they're out there selling. And sometimes they oversell and underdeliver. Everyone's not brought along. So you have the authority to go out, negotiate that deal as a salesman or whatever, but then that salesman has to bring a team along so that they're read in early on what they're going to have to execute on, what they're going to have to deliver, right? And then the relationship management with that client that was made promises when you were selling. And so there are so many skill sets that we have that we've developed that just need an industry specific touch, if you will, and you put them to action. It's just a tool, in your kit. So talk about the decision to depart the military. What drove all that?
Yeah, sure. So the when I reflect back, I think it's a question of trying to make the best decision I possibly could with the information I had at the time. And in this case, the timeline matters in the sense of, as we completed our 05-06 Iraq deployment, that was actually a drawdown, right? So it appeared in that moment as if war's done, like we're wrapping up, we're closing this thing off. And with that context and relative to, there's a natural kind of periodization of your time as an aviator in particular in the Army, where this well, but you have periods of really intense time in the aircraft, and you're kind of at a peak of proficiency in terms of the flying and fighting aspects of it. And then you have these other periods that are more about kind of supporting the force and doing what the business world would know largely as like strategy and operations type work. And so I was kind of closing out one peak, if you will, and wrestling with some questions that, quite honestly, at this point, I can laugh about and say, well, those are probably above your pay grade, son. But the question that was in my mind and that I was challenged with was, here I am, out there flying around $25 million helicopter, $100,000 missile sitting on the rail. And sometimes we're like, putting a $100,000 missile in a mud hut. And I just could not, in my mind, compute these two things. And when I would look around, it's a tremendous effort to project force into a theater in the way that we did. And I looked at it and said, well, I don't understand, kind of like how this evolves. So great question. My solution at the time was, I'm going to go to business school and figure this out, figuring that the private sector will hold answers. And without a doubt, over time, I have gleaned tremendous insight from how would the private sector approach parts of that problem, but probably more than anything, what I've come to appreciate, especially after my time at Bridgewater, which is a global macro hedge fund, where you get an opportunity to look at like really long cycles of economic activity, is better appreciating the war we were in, the larger cycle of kind of growth of American power projected and the challenges of what we've come to know as a war on terror, but is a confluence of different geopolitical forces. And so I wouldn't say that a single person going to get their MBA was going to resolve those. But for me, that was the context of the decision that I made. Not going to laugh about it now. But it was curiosity driven is the answer to your question. And, from that, I did have a chance in the years afterwards to really try and dig in and work on at least projects that were aimed at some of those kind of economic vitality questions, which I think is the thing that sits underneath it. Is if you boil that down, I would say anytime you have underemployed young males, you have a bad situation. And that was the thing that I was trying to figure out, is like, what's happening here? And you have this like oil rich country and a whole set of them, but a lot of discontent. Why is that? And how would you solve that? And that really comes down to a question of not just national, it's multinational policy, and also appreciating that there's some natural cycles in there. Resource-rich countries will go through those cycles in time, and really the solution set sits in crafting things that bridge beyond the resource-intensive periods.
Absolutely.
Does that help to frame it, Jay?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
And so today you are doing.
So if you jump forward, what I'm doing now is I work with earlier stage companies, helping to scale those earlier stage companies, and helping larger corporate clients go the opposite direction and drive growth that they might have a harder time accessing if they were deploying the kind of, we'll say, like heavy machinery of the larger institution. So on the one side of it, it's kind of adding strength and rigor to earlier stage ventures as they grow. And the other side of it is actually bringing flexibility and agility to larger corporate environments that sometimes have a hard time breaking their paradigms for how business is done.
Yeah, that we do a lot of work in that space of really transformation, and then the change management involved in going from an industrial age model to a 21st century, flatter, faster, more agile. And it's hard. It's a big transition for these older, large, Fortune 500 companies. So that brings us to, of course, being the warrior that you are, you never let your fitness slip. Never. It's not a decision. I made a decision years ago that every day I was going to brush my teeth and I was going to work out. I don't think about that. It's just something I do, right? And you're no different. So living out in California and spending a bit of time, because I follow you on Strava, of course, on the mountain bike, some beautiful trails there. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, sure. So it's the framing that you provide is an important one, because exercise is just a part of who I am. I may even forget to brush my teeth, but I won't forget to work out that day. And it's always been a part of who I am, even on those Iraq deployments, in the middle of the day, 100 and whatever. Yeah. And I'd go out and get a run like along the berm and whatnot.
So I got to interrupt you. I got to
Yeah.
interrupt you there, because when you were saying that, hey, I'm willing to deploy, send me wherever, I was that guy. I did that on my first trip to Bosnia. But the first question, they're like, all right, what questions do you have? I'm like, how big is the outpost? What's the circumference of the perimeter? And can I run on the roads? I need what workout capability do I have at this dump location you're going to send me to? And they're like, really? That's your question? I'm like, you don't understand. Like, that's the number one priority here.
Totally. So when I was in Eritrea, I built my own weight set out of some mud bricks, and I would go run the roads. And the other teammates thought I was crazy because the place had been mined, over a number of years, and they'd washed down. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to run the tire tracks. And that worked out okay. But yeah, so exercise has always been there, kind of with me and for me. It's part of how I stay grounded in the world, and it's just part of who I am. And you're kind of asking about an incident from a few years ago where this was early pandemic, just kind of situated in folks' minds. And I was at a point, I have two young kids, and pandemic caused a lot of trade-offs, but one of the benefits was I wasn't traveling as much. And so I was actually in a great space physically, family, mentally, all those things, and had a really good life rhythm. And we had a new puppy, COVID puppy, which I told the kids we could get after my wife got COVID really early on. And we were out on a Sunday, and I'd said, okay, cool. What we're going to do is we're going to go out. We're going to do a family hike in the morning, take the puppy out, do those kind of things, big dog walk. And then I'm going to throw the bike on the car and I'll ride home from there. So we went out to, the parks were technically closed, but you could, park next to the park, and go up into the mountains. So then that's what I've been doing for months, where I was like, this is amazing. You got hundreds of acres that are totally walled off. The parking lots are closed. So I was having a great time. And we went out, did this big dog walk. Dog walk probably got like a little bit longer than initially expected. And that's generally been my experience in life, is I'll plan for one thing and I add a few miles in there. And so there we are, it's early in the afternoon, and we got back to the car, and I still remember this. My wife said, it's hot. It's the middle of the day. You sure you don't want to just come with us and have a hamburger with the kids? And I ran that decision loop in my head. I was like, ooh, hamburger, like hot, like maybe some lemonade. That'd be amazing. I said, no, I'm going for a ride. And I always, those who know me know I probably always also have too much going on. So the other thing that I was doing was I was going to get back to the house and have a call with friends of ours that were back on the East Coast. And so I was running this clock in my mind of, I skip the hamburger, I do the ride, and I could probably still make it back just on time for the call that we're going to do later. So I leave them, kiss them goodbye, and I go out for this ride. And it is just a glorious, glorious summertime day in Northern California. And I just built up a new bike, and for anybody that's a cyclist, new bike day is a big deal. So I was like, life could not be better. Like, two kids, dog, wife, like sunshine, it's all amazing. And I'm up climbing this hill, and kind of came up there, and I looked back, and there's a local mountain near us, Mount Tam, and it's kind of gorgeously silhouetted behind me. And I'd stopped to take a photo for a second, and I really did. I absorbed that thought. I said, like, life is good. This is amazing. And I said, all right, but you got to get back home, so let's go. And so I'd summited this little peak, and I looked down, and I'd kind of come off a fire road, and I was on this side trail of the peak, and I said, well, time to descend. And I dropped in on that. And important context for those listeners who aren't riders themselves. I was riding a gravel bike, so it's a drop bar, kind of moderate sized tire bike, no suspension. And I rolled over on this hill, and I was going to do like I'd always done, which is just kind of like a little bit of body English, slide your way down, think like skiing, like a somewhat loose slope. Except this was more like skiing a icy slope. And you instantly make those they're not even mental corrections, because they're so wired into how you are as an athlete, really, and kind of knowing. So, okay, cool, I'm going to bunny hop over here, and I'll bunny hop over there. And I ran out of bunny hops and body English. And so I start to get to the bottom of this hill, and the whole time I've been just not feeling it. Like it wasn't right. And it wasn't anything big, but it just wasn't right. And I saw the trail snap left, and kind of did that instant calculation in my head. I said, ooh, if I turn that hard right now, I'm going to fall and I might break my collarbone. And for whatever reason, all the years I've been riding, and I started riding, maybe when I was 12 or 13, racing at that age. So I owe a lot of miles on the bike at this point in time. I've always had this fear of breaking your collarbone, because guys do it all the time. And I just didn't want to do it, right? Guys do it all the time. I'm like, no, I don't want to break my collarbone. So I processed that in my mind as like, don't break your collarbone. But if I went straight, I said, I can just jump off onto this fire road that's right here, and I'm going to keep going. And so I did. I said, great. I just like pick up, little bunny hop. By the way, I'm an over 40-year-old individual at this point in time. I don't know that bunny hop should be in your repertoire, but it was in mine. And I get out there in what at the moment I didn't realize, but a second later I did, which was free space. Right. So I'm thinking that I'm making a flat transition off a hill onto a road, when in reality, there was about a 6 or 8 foot drop between those two things. So now, I'm kind of like Wile E. Coyote with the handlebars pointed down, and I'm, gaining airspeed and losing altitude very quickly. And so I dumped the bike, and in my mind, I mentioned earlier, you'd ask kind of how did I grow up? Well, I grew up doing gymnastics and martial arts and all these things. And I thought, well, I'm just going to do a break fall. And so I dumped the bike and I went to flip over, and I only made it around as far as my head, which is not the way that you want to arrest your fall. And so full top of the head impact, right there, and boom, hit the ground.
And what went through your mind now? That for me, it's always okay. Assess, go through your whole body. What's going on? How did that go?
Totally. Well, thankfully, what didn't go through my mind was a rock, which could have been, very likely outcome. So always wear a helmet. I genuinely believe that the helmet saved my life, like without a doubt. You're absolutely correct, though, that the years of training kicked in, and I've said to other folks that I don't know whether I was built for it or trained for it. This was a moment that I was ready for. Sometimes things in life will come at you, and you don't see them coming, and you have no idea how to handle them. This was something I certainly didn't see it coming, but I did have tools to be able to handle it. And so I know that I'm, telling most of the story in kind of a lighthearted fashion, but let's be clear, this was a full top of the head impact, lawn dart, straight into the ground, and then just boom, pile over right there. And I remember I can only describe it as a sensation. It's like a hazy memory sensation, but just kind of like this looming negative presence, almost like an embodiment of just the bad in the world. And I saw that kind of like coming up over the hill towards me. And I mentally said, not today. You don't get a vote here. I'm getting up off this hill and I'm going to own this moment. And so I just suppressed what is probably like it's big monster of like fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's just coming at you and trying to visit. And, I said, no. I remember that very strongly. And then I started with it, kind of an ABC check to make sure that, my bodily systems were functioning and everything was good. And I was thankfully okay in that regard. So, airway, breathing, circulation, everything was good. And I said, all right, cool, time to get up. And I went to go and get up. And I was not going to be able to get up. So I went to roll over to kind of push up off the ground. And the most intense pain I've ever felt in my life, just like right through my back. And when people say it's like a hot poker, yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like a piece of iron that had just come out of the fire. Incredible pain. And I had like some level of awareness to say, you probably shouldn't push that, buddy. We're going to need to get that looked at. And so I went to reach for my phone in order to call help because I'm out, kind of by myself at that point. And, cycling jersey, your pockets are on the back. And with whatever had gone on there, I didn't know at the time, but as I reached my arm back, that only dialed what I already thought was an incredible pain. It dialed it up like another 10x, right? And so I'm reaching. I'm trying to get this phone. I finally get my hand in the pocket, and I've got nothing. There's no phone, nothing there. And so, there's times in life where mentally you're telling yourself, I will not quit. But that was a moment where it's like, whew.
Doubt's
right about
coming.
now, good time to ring the bell. Like I said, I'm not doing that either. Okay,
wow.
I gotta figure this problem out. But it's just a very deflating feeling because you think you're about to get to the summit and there's no phone. Okay, right. Problem. And so I actually I took a breath, released back. I just had to release some of the pressure. And I looked over. I saw the phone. It was probably about 10 feet, kind of up slope. And so I used my left arm and dragged myself over to that, and I couldn't really couldn't activate my legs or move up, and I definitely wasn't going to be able to roll over. So it's just kind of a one-armed effort grabbing the grass that was there along the trail side. And this hand was actually broken as well. So that kept me more awake than coffee would, put it that way. So I got battling through that, got the phone, called my wife, told her, hey, I need some help out here. Thankfully, she, you'd already mentioned, so she is an aviator, pilot, and I was able to send her the coordinates for where I was. And I chose to call her because I didn't want to go through the 20 vetting questions of the 911 call. I just needed help, and I wanted that to get there. And so I sent my wife the lat long for where I was. I realize standing here now, this can sound like kind of an easy narration, but to kind of bring you inside the moment, I remember having my phone open and staring at the screen and wishing for all the world that I wanted to get the location to my wife, and I couldn't figure it out. Like I couldn't clarify in my mind, like what's the button I push from Google Maps to send this location? And so all I could do is I took a photo, right? And if you look at Google Maps right now, you're gonna say clear as day. It's this little like circle and an arrow, and you press that, and it sends the location. It's super clear. But these are these moments where even when you're trying your hardest, sometimes in moments of extreme, it's like duress and trauma, you're going to hit mental barriers, and you don't know where you're going to bump up against them, and you get it's a very natural human response. You get a localized tunnel vision on what those things are, and that was one of those for me. And so, thankfully, I was able to kind of process the rest of it, and she was able to receive that message.
And so, a rider came along and found you before they got there, or no?
It was a young runner.
Or runner.
Yeah, it was a young runner. And this is probably a more humorous part of the story, depending upon your generation. But so this young dude runs up. He's like running. He's good looking. He's got his top off. He's in the beautiful California sunshine. And you have to kind of picture this. Like, I'm lying on the trail. My bike is off to one side. I've got blood streaming, down my arm. My face is probably all super contorted. I've got a helmet that just looks like a smashed styrofoam cooler. And he's running along, and I hear him coming first, but I'm trying to like keep my head locked to the sky and not move my back or neck around. And I hear him coming, and then I see him come into visibility, and he just jumps up and over my legs and keeps running. So I said, hey brother, can I get some help over here? He's going, oh, huh? He takes his headphones off and says, oh yeah, man. Like, what do you need? I said, well, if you don't mind, I could use some water. And if you have a phone that works, could you call 911 and let them know where we are and, kind of what's happening? He goes, oh, yeah, sure. And so I had to talk him through. So this is a time you mentioned the training earlier. It's pretty profound. Younger dude, probably right out of high school or something like that. And
he just jumps you.
He literally just jumped right over my legs. I mean, I was smack dab in the middle of the trail, and I was not sunbathing. My jersey is wide open for fishing for the phone and everything else. Like, I could not have looked like more of a mess. And he just jumped right over my legs and kept going. And so, I get him to call 911, and I kind of narrate for him, hey, here's what you need to say. And then this was kind of amazing. Like, I knew that I had control of myself, and I'd gotten enough of a degree of respiratory control. Breathing was really hard. The musculature around my ribs kind of started to go into tension, but I got enough respiratory control. And I found it funny. That this dude would just run by and keep going.
Wow.
So I'll be honest, I kind of started to play with him. And I asked him, like, well, how's your day going? Like, you having a good run? Like, is everything good?
Sarcasm that the dude's just totally not getting. Wow.
It's kind of like the Army humor comes back. Like, no matter how bad it gets, like, you got to be able to tell a joke. So
I saw a guy missing a leg with a tourniquet on, smoking a cigar one day in the back of his leg was blown off. He's in the back of the medevac. He's on morphine now, and he's smoking a big stogie, laughing, telling jokes. Yeah, it's morbid, but everyone copes different. I tell jokes when I'm nervous and in that kind of moment.
Exactly. So that was my experience there. And then the local paramedics showed up. They'd driven a truck kind of up the fire road to get up there. And I'll tell you, you mentioned earlier, just like the presence of physical fitness in one's own life. And I'll never have I been so glad to see just some like monstrous set of forearms reach down and like say, "Hey man, are you okay?" And I looked up at these dudes and I just had total faith. I'm like, "We get out of here. This is going to be okay. It's going to be all right." And so these guys were absolutely wonderful. And they came in, they fully attended to kind of survey of me and the situation. Called in a helicopter, put me out of there on a backboard in a brace and whatnot. But even with them, like we're laughing and joking. These guys are such a bunch of jokers. They took my picture, like while they're stretchering me, they got another guy that's taking photos because I'm joking with them about like, this is going to be fine. It's going to be okay. And they were kind of doing their job, but also, they're doing the thing you need to do to anybody that's injured, which is telling them like, "You're good, man. It's all going to be good." And I met up with them later, and they looked at me like, "Oh man, we were lying to you. You were a total mess." But they did say at the time, they said, one of the things relative to a lot of other folks that take out of a similar accident situation that worked to my benefit was I've always lifted alongside all the kind of endurance sports that you and I share. I've always also, found time and a way to move the weights around. I used to get a lot of trouble when I was running at West Point. A coach would kick me out of the weight room all the time. "Harrington, Taylor, what are you guys doing in there? You're supposed to be on the track. You need to lose weight, not gain it."
Right.
But one of the things that they had said, kind of assessing things, was for the way I landed and then the way your body tends to respond, having your body and its musculature with the ability to kind of freeze and hold really helped to protect things. And so in the moment of getting loaded up, I'm thinking like, "Yep, totally, like we're good. And I'm in some pain, but we're going to be great." And so I jump in the helicopter, and then of course I'm telling aviation jokes with these guys, like just talking to the flight medic and stuff that are in there. They aeromedevaced me off that hillside out to the trauma center that's over in the East Bay. It's a John Muir Trauma Center. And I got over there, and still I'm kind of bringing that winner's mindset of like, I'm good, I'm going to be fine, everything's cool. And the whole time too, I refused any pain meds. So I
Wow.
they offering like, even I think it was the guy in the helicopter that said like, "You want fentanyl lollipop and stuff?" And I'm just like, "Absolutely not, no way, like don't touch the stuff, like never have, never will, like I don't need any of that stuff in my body." And so I get to the hospital, kind of get checked out. You get a chance to check out all the wonders of modern medicine, get scanned top to bottom. And it's
You're
like
thinking,
late.
are you thinking literally, I'm going to be really sore tomorrow, but I'm eating dinner tonight at the house?
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind that I'm not going to be home, with a story to tell and be good to go. But I'm definitely going home. Right? So that's what's going on in my mind. And it gets to be late that night. Let's say that it's midnight or 1 in the morning, even by that point. And I've literally been visited by every specialist you can imagine. It's a full-on trauma center, and so there's every manner of specialist has been in there. And I'm still like going back and forth with the nurses, like and they're saying, "Hey, you're great, and I got this back. You're checked out. Like this is okay." And I think I knew I'd like broken the hand at that point. I'm like, "All right, I'll give that one up to the scoreboard, but we're still going to be good." And then all of a sudden, it's like the air pressure just changes, and you just feel an environmental shift, like when a storm is about to roll through, but it's actually like everything calms down and goes super silent. And I'm in a neck brace. I can't look around, but I'm just operating off all of the senses, like, like something's not right here. And I see like I kind of feel / hear a little bit of discussion out in the hallway. And then a nice gentleman walks up to me and he says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Chen, your neurosurgeon." And right there, I was like, okay, not everybody has one of those. And that was the moment I was like, maybe I won't be home for dinner.
Yeah.
And And so, his, the punchline for his readout was, no, buddy, you're not good. You did some serious damage here. And so I'd broken 4 vertebrae between my neck and my back, as well as a first rib, and then my hand. So some legit trauma that had happened there.
Yeah,
that's the aftermath.
That's a lot of staples.
Yeah, so that's his handiwork, which is is good, and pretty neat, all things considered. But what you're looking at there is kind of the results from would have been another few days later, because what I was left with was a choice of what are you going to do about it. So I was lucky that nothing had penetrated the spinal column. I was kind of good on that front, but there was, out of all of that damage, there was one vertebrae that had sheared inwards and threatened the spinal cord. And for all those happy things that I mentioned earlier, like those are also responsibilities. I got a young family, and the set of decisions I had to make was like, well, how do you proceed? Because if any slippage, given where the injury site was, it'd be full paralysis. So full quadriplegic, if not tetraplegic, which is when you also get organ shutdown. And so I thought on it, and this is where it's a battle between one's ego and one's intellect. And my ego, as listeners can probably already tell right now, is like, well, like we're going to do it without surgery. I'm getting out of here, and I'm walking out of here on my own. And my intellect, from all of the years of aviation risk assessment and the different financial services I've been in, is like trying to process all the probabilities of like what happens if, and where I netted out on that was with young children. I could not run the risk of at that point making a conscious decision that could materially change their lives, right? Accidents, these things happen, and that's the way it is. But what I elected to do was have surgery to help stabilize that portion of the spine, so that risk was taken off the board.
Right. Awesome. And of course, in true Scott fashion, there you are afterwards, when it's time to go home finally.
Totally. So it's probably a couple days later, maybe 2, and the start of the healing journey. That was a really big one. It took everything I had, and quite honestly, like family and community around me had, to muster the personal strength, but also resources to heal from that significant of an injury, and to do so in the fashion that my mindset was, I'm coming all the way back, right? So I'm not going to let this hold me back. Like I'm going to come back in every which way that I like to live my life and show up. And so we made some major adjustments. My brother actually came out to live with me for a while, because what it would take to kind of like get me back on my feet and care for me was significant. And so he and I camped out at a friend's house, which we were fortunate to be able to use just down the street from us. But it took away a lot of the fray and melee that is life with young children, and not really good for a spinal cord injury patient. And what you actually saw in that last photo, which for anyone that's listening and not viewing, is just me standing outside, kind of giving the chakra symbol, like rock on, life's going to be cool. Like we're going to go do this. And what I was specifically doing there was, I'd elected to do the surgery, but I was not going to count myself out from any perspective of feeling like I got knocked back. And so right from the moment of the next day after surgery, normally you're in hospital for, I think it's roughly a 3-day cycle is what they plan for to get you up and back on your feet. And they came in that morning, they said, all right, we're going to try and like get you roll out of bed, and we'll see if you can stand, and then we'll, that'll be good. We'll take it from there over the next couple of days. And I just said, okay, roger that. And I rolled over to get out of the bed, and I stood up, and they're like, all right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I asked them, like, can I take a step? They said, yeah, if you want to. I said, okay, good. I'm gonna take a step. And I just started stepping. And then he's like, all right, well, if you feel comfortable, like try to make it to the door. This is like a big physical therapy dude. He's like got his arms like making sure I don't weeble wobble and topple over. So yeah, I'm gonna make it to the door. And I made it to the door. And he's like, dude, okay, well, that's some work. I said, all right, what would you normally do the next day? Because I was already making the door was the fall, like what would have been day +1, right? Well, normally, on day 2, you're getting out and you're going to the nurse's station. I said, all right, I see that. Let's go. And we start walking our way down the hallway. And this is not a fast walk. This is, like every bit of your mind body connection, you got to fire it to get those steps to happen. And go to the nurse's station. And he said, okay, you want to try to go to the end of the hallway? Now at this point, he's like, I see what you're ready to do. So let's do it. I said, yep, we're going to the end of the hallway. And so we just keep walking. And it's not an easy walk, right? Like it hurts a lot. It's not an easy walk at all. And so we're going to the end of the hallway. And we get to the end of the hallway and you kind of hit up against this door. And he says, all right, man, I think that's enough for now. I said, I don't. And let's go upstairs. And he looked at me, he's like, dude, that's not a good idea. I said, no, I think it's a great idea. And so he opened the door for me, and we walked over, and I climbed that first flight of stairs, and that's their day 3 check is as to whether or not you can leave. He said, all right, dude, like I can't believe it, but you're ready to go. Like you can leave. And that is, I know you're trying to help, help your listeners, live at their fullest and be their best selves. To make that walk called back on so many parts of my own journey, to get there. And it's easy. Like I could point to, a number of, like all the years of racing and stuff, but it goes deeper where, you have these like little challenges, these little things that come at you in life, and they set new benchmarks for who you are and how you show up in the world. And one of those that I specifically remember was I was probably 10 years old at the time. And I was climbing Mount Washington, which is a relatively high peak on the East Coast. It's not quite West Coast standards, but on the East Coast, it's a big one. It's 6,500 feet or so. Climbed Mount Washington with my dad, and we were up there hiking, with him and a couple of his other friends, and then all the other kids were probably 13 or 14-year-old boys. Which from a developmental scale is actually massive, right? Like the difference between a 10-year-old little dude and a 13 or 14-year-old. And I was borrowing at the time this old set of my mom's hiking boots, like handmade in Switzerland from when my parents were young and had gone to Europe, and built in the old way, which meant they were more like steel than leather. And so my feet are totally chafed up and all kinds of bleeding. And I'm somewhere probably 2/3 of the way up. I said to my dad, like, oh, it's too hard. Like, I can't go. My feet are bleeding. I got a million and one excuses. And he just looked me like straight in the eye, little emotion, but enough of a push in there. He just looked at me and said, you're Harrington. Harringtons don't quit. Let's go. And that was a new benchmark for me that I always held on to. And it, in everything else I did in life, I would just like move the plane with it. But that statement stuck with me. And years later, I had gone after flight school. We all do a little bit of survival training after flight school. Every aviator does. I had a mentor at West Point who was a special forces officer, and in the course of some conversation, I had asked him, kind of about different things that he'd done and where he'd been and whatnot. And he told me, he said, out of all the schools I've ever done, the most formative for me was the Army's SEER course, which is the Army's Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Evasion course. And what that school does, it teaches you how to how to avoid capture if you're a downed aviator or other combatant, and how to resist and survive captivity if you are. And a lot of it goes to it's mental training is what it is. It's not the woodsmanship skills or any of that. And through the course of that, like I had adopted some things of no matter what, I will not be broken was just a pledge that I had made to myself. And that school is a wonderful laboratory to test whether or not that can be true. Right. And so that walk in that hallway was, it was an expression of, those moments and many others over the years that had helped to reset the plane of what I expected of myself. Right. And, I had attended to physical training along the way. So the mental meeting the physical there matters because my injury was significant, but it was an upper torso injury. I didn't have leg damage or anything. And although you and I spent a lot of time in endurance sports, I'd taken up CrossFit years ago, and that really actually helped me to redevelop a whole of body fitness. And that was absolutely put to the test because now you're in a position, you can't move your arms post-surgery like that. You can't do no ability to pull yourself up or do anything along those lines. And so it's just, okay, like you're basically, to get out of bed, you're going to do a squat or a pistol motion to be able to make that happen and balance with all of that and not cause injury to yourself or anything else. And so the complement of those two things, constantly attending to physical fitness, set the frame, gave me the ability, but presenting myself intentionally with hard mental challenges over the course of life. Now I could draw on those as a reservoir to make that walk. And then to the picture you pointed to, I continued that journey when I got home. We camped out in this house. Only mission at this point is get healthy. And so I was 100% committed to that. On the physical side, what I said is, I'm going to walk farther every day. And that started off, I think literally the moment that photo was taken, it was get to the end of the block. Okay, great. We'll go to the end of the block. And then by the next morning, it was around the block, right? And you can see where this goes. It comes 2 blocks, 3 blocks. Yeah. And then by the end of, basically where I got to was by the end of the first week, I was able to walk a mile. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to add a mile to that every week hereafter. And so each week I would start to add increments and across more varied terrain. And this just became my thing. And these walks, by the way, were exhausting. I would come back from a half block and then sleep 6 hours. So and by the time we got up there, and I think it was, I don't actually recall whether it was 10 miles or it might have been 12. There was a point at which my wife said, okay, knock it off. Now you're out here walking all day long. You're good on that front. We need you to start to do, other things. Right. But those are kind of those literally mile markers, but markers I put down for myself on the journey back to full health.
Right. So it's interesting. I had so many questions I was going to ask you that you answered in all of that, but then so many more things to just point out that are so important. So, I've known you over 20 years and this very positive can-do attitude. As you mentioned, some of that was environmental. It was things that, that came through parenting and an outdoor active lifestyle. And I'm sure there's some of that's just who you are. That's your mentality. But we don't do our kids, for example, a service. Your dad could easily said, oh yeah, if your feet hurt, let's go back. And so I did a little short video just the other day, and I posted across all social media and on LinkedIn. Don't stop short of the pain. The lesson lies beyond the pain. And it's, you can't set that next level of bar, that next level, unless you push to the next level. And so when we hurt a little bit or it's uncomfortable, if we allow ourselves or our kids to stop there, that bar never gets lifted. And then everything you've been talking about, that whole skill set, you would have been, in my opinion, robbed of that skill set that enabled you to come back from this. It's also it would have been easy to be a victim, right? Just, oh, this horrible thing happened to me. My back's broken. Woe is me, Eeyore. and,
Right.
and it's taken forever to recover, or always, I don't know, disability the rest of your life if you didn't do anything about it. But you didn't allow that to happen. You took control and set goals for yourself every single day. And that way of living is so much more rewarding and fulfilling.
100%, Jimmy. It's not that I don't see the other way, and see how people could get to a place of allowing it to happen. But I've chosen not to. I saw something that you had mentioned the other day, and you're real clear in your own mind. You said, "I don't do late," and you had super strong conviction on that. And I have to cut to the fact, like, I sometimes do late because I often overload, right? So it's
Weak.
I totally weak, right? You can shame me. You can shame me for it. It's not the best of intentions, but it's a failure mode for me. What I don't do though is I don't do feeling sorry for myself. I don't do like, well, this isn't working out how I wanted it to, and it's not like the shiny, happy, life voyage that I was promised, or something like that. And I think if you do allow yourself to fall into the trap of believing, number one, just believing that life will be as pure and happy as sometimes it looks, just realize those sometimes moments they're high points on anyone's journey, right? Like,
Right.
we happen to be talking about like one particular like hammer of a life experience for me. I've also had amazing high points. I was literally, if you look at the contrast, I was, well, actually about 25, 30 feet higher. I was on one of life's high points. It was a glorious day. And then a few seconds later, and a little bit of like loose scree, and I was on one of life's low points.
Yeah.
And that is life. Like, that's how that
Yeah.
journey goes. And you've got to be able to surf that as it comes to you. And one, it's interesting. I do a lot of work with earlier stage companies, and some fundamentals of human psyche can come back into the workplace, even when you'd like to think, well, at work, I'm in total control and here's how it goes. And as it relates to this, it's often when you see when people go to explore new territory, they'll pull back. They pull back like out of an unexplained fear. And if you can help to develop the tools of the positive sensations that come off the exploration, people are more willing to try things, and they'll often find growth through doing that, business growth, and personal growth for that matter. What you're pointing at though, in terms of the road to recovery here, is I guess I've always tried to look at it of like, well, what might I find on the other side of that hill, if you will? And so, for instance, like at West Point, I was not a recruited athlete. I was a walk-on athlete. And when you're in a Division I program where you have plenty of recruited athletes, and I know some of those same folks that I ran with, these are amazing athletes, like unbelievable physical specimens, great humans too. But the stable's full. Like, nobody needs any more horses hanging around, and it's like pretty clear. It's take it or leave it. Like, if you can cut the line and you can be here and deliver, you're welcome. You're happy for you to be here. And if you can't, no problem. But like, there's plenty of other things that you can do, and no one's reaching their hand down, necessarily to say, let's find a way for you to be here. You have to really, really drive to earn your way to be there. And then at which point, of course, your teammates are there to help you advance and grow, and all throughout. The benefit of applying yourself to struggles like that, whether it's on the athletic front or it could be in a new team you're joining at work, and you've maybe grown up in a product role, and now you'd like to try your hand at sales. I guarantee you that's going to feel extremely uncomfortable. It would be much easier to slide back to the thing that you know versus what you don't know, and continue to push on. But if you can instead look at the increments of new capability that you're building as you do so, which in the physical world is like muscle or time off the clock, but in the business world is going to come across as like failed meeting, but like slightly better meeting. Hey, first sale, right? Like, not first sale, second sale, and it progresses from there. And that's just a more fulfilling path to be on.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I can't tell you how rewarding it was for me to get the full story finally, and to catch up with you. Yeah, I think as I talk to you, I'm having these visions of the truth to come clean. So when Scott got here and we were teammates on the Campbell team, we'd go out for these long runs, and running was my strength, a long distance guy. And so we'd go on these runs, and I would just start increasing the pace, and people would start to drop. And Scott was always the last guy there, and then I'd finally get, wow, one more, just a little bit faster. And get him, and then we'd get on the bike, and I could almost feel the excitement in Scott when we get on the bike, because he was it is payback day, and I'm about to make you hurt. And so we would ride, and everybody'd be talking, and people would start dropping, and the audible breathing, and then the talking completely stops, and then the tires separate. And Scott looks back with a little cheesy grin and says, "See you at the house." But again, that's what made us good. It was I'm going to push you to your limit, and I'm going to break you now. And now it's my turn. I'm going to push you to the limit, and I'm going to break you. We'll both be better for it.
Without a doubt. Surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you, and also support you through your journey. Probably the biggest cheat code you could find to success and enjoyment in life.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, brother. It was great catching up with you, and love your story.
All right, Jimmy. Keep well.
You bet.
The old guard rolls and a hero passes by. Another one's gone to the other side.